Hello, everyone, and thank you, Miles, for allowing us to host a PM Connect event here today. You'd have seen, I came here not so long ago to see your massive investment in the new monster lines here, and both the PM and I both respect and love the Coca-Cola company for what it does and how it operates across the globe, but especially here. And actually, you kind of, one of the reasons why the Prime Minister has spent so much time making sure that we get our negotiations on the protocol right, because you operate across all of Ireland. And we needed to make sure that any new relationship both looked after both those markets, but protected Northern Ireland's place in our union. Now, we think we've managed to do that, but to explain it more, I'd like to hand you over to the Prime Minister.
Well, hi, everybody. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Miles, for having us. And just before we get going, I know, like me, all of you will be thinking of John Caldwell and his family, and an absolutely appalling and shocking attack. And I know we're all thinking of them and praying hard for a strong recovery for John. But it's a reminder, actually, that there are some in our society that want to take us back to the past. And I know that none of us want to see that happen. We want to look forward. And actually, that's what I saw when Chris and I were here on one of my previous visits at the end of last year, and we went to Harland and Wolff and saw the incredible investment that's going in, the new Royal Navy contracts, the jobs that are being created. It was an enormous sign of promise about what was possible. And again, Miles is doing it right here with the investment that's happening in this factory and facility and jobs that are being created. It's a sign of what is possible, and that's the potential that I am so keen to realise for the people of Northern Ireland. But I also know that things are not working as they should be. And the protocol that was negotiated as it was being implemented was causing real challenges for people, for families, for businesses here in Northern Ireland. And in too many ways, it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel that the balance of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement that was so painstakingly negotiated and settled for almost a quarter of a century, that balance had been disrupted. And that's why I've spent a lot of time together with Chris and others working really hard to try and find a resolution on that thorny issue. And I'm really pleased. In fact, I'm over the moon that yesterday we managed to have a decisive breakthrough with our negotiations with the EU, reached agreement, the new Windsor framework, that I think is an extraordinary positive step for Northern Ireland. And it represents, as the European Union President herself said, a historic moment for us to move forward and resolve some of the difficulties of the past. But what does it achieve? Well, in a nutshell, it does three things. The first is it ensures that goods can flow freely across our United Kingdom internal market. So that if someone is sending something from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, we've managed to create something called a green lane, so it can just move very smoothly without tons of customs paperwork or hassle or checks. We've made sure that that process feels to anybody as if they're in the same country, because they are in the same country, and it didn't feel like that before, and that was disrupting businesses and supply lines. So that bit has been fixed, which is brilliant. But also, it's not just businesses that are sending things up and or back and forth across, also people. Someone sending their granddaughter a birthday present in a parcel, someone doing online shopping. All of that was also about to need tons of customs hassle, and that would have been ridiculous, right? So we've managed to fix all of that as well. So things can just move freely and smoothly between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And that's what the Green Lane is about. But it's also about making sure that the same goods are available. And that brings me on to my second point. And that's about protecting Northern Ireland's place in our union. Now, when you're part of a country, you expect that you get all the same benefits of being part of that country wherever you live. And in too many ways, that didn't feel like it was working, right? When you went to the garden centre and you couldn't get the same oak trees. I remember famously the Jubilee, when we celebrated Her Late Majesty's Jubilee, there were these Jubilee oaks. They weren't available in Northern Ireland's garden centres. Seed potatoes, such an important part of Northern Ireland's horticultural industry, not available. You think about medicines. We have the situation where it was going to be the case that the UK might license a really impressive new drug to help treat cancer, and it wouldn't be available for patients here in Northern Ireland. When I was Chancellor, I was cutting taxes. In fact, I cut taxes on beer duty in pubs, which we could do once we left the EU. We could say, actually, we're going to have one tax for beer that you buy elsewhere, but when you're in the pub, you want to have a lower tax on beer. And we could do that, and I announced it. And it's going to happen in the rest of the UK this summer, but it wasn't able to happen in Northern Ireland, and that didn't seem right at all. When you take your pet on holiday, it's another example. Someone coming to take their pet on holiday had to get a rabies jab. They had to get a certificate from their vet. They had to get tapeworm treatment, and that all is clearly ridiculous. So those were all the ways in which I felt, hang on, we're not part of the same country. Well, we've resolved all of those issues thanks to the work we've done. And crucially, I talked about product availability. The hassle of getting a supermarket lorry from Great Britain to Northern Ireland was enormous. Hundreds of certificates, tons of bureaucracy to get through, and worse. What was available in Great Britain on the shelves in the supermarkets, which I know is a bit challenging at the moment, but it's getting better, but more generally, was not available in the shelves in Northern Ireland, and that wasn't right. And we've resolved all those issues so that there's going to be the same things in both places, which is as it should be. And that brings me on to the third thing. And the third thing is really important. It's about sovereignty. It's about all of you. It's about making sure you, the people of Northern Ireland, and your elected representatives are in control, and that you have a say in what happens to you. And I think for too many people, it felt like, hang on, we accept that we have access to the EU market, and that's a good thing, and we accept that we don't want to have a border on the island of Ireland, a hard border. We accept that, and that's a good thing. And because of that, we recognise that there is some role for EU law, but we need to have a say on that. Can't just ignore us when it comes to that. And that was what was missing. And we did something really special yesterday. We created this new thing called the Stormont Break, which means that your assembly is going to be able to have a look at any of the new EU laws that come down the pipe and say, hang on, if there's something that's really serious that we think is going to have a really big impact and we can't find any way to resolve it, then we have the ability to say no, that we can block it. And at which point the UK government will have a veto on that new rule, and that puts you in the driving seat. So that is a really powerful new mechanism that we've created. It puts democracy and sovereignty back in Northern Ireland where it belongs, and I think is a really powerful commitment to all of you that the concerns that I've heard, that Chris has heard over weeks, months and years have been listened to, taken seriously and now acted on. And I'm here to answer your questions. I'm here to listen to you, as I have been over the past months that I've had this job, about what we can do to make your lives better, because that's ultimately what I'm here for. Right, every day when I'm doing this job, I'm figuring out how can I make a positive difference for all of you. And I knew that the protocol was the thing that was making the biggest difference, the biggest problem, and that's why we needed to put the most effort in. I'm really pleased that we were able to achieve that yesterday, and I believe, hand on heart, that it provides a basis for all the parties, all the communities here, to look at it, to look at the detail, consider it, and they will see that it is a big step forward, that it does address the concerns that people have, and I hope will allow them to come together, put all the division and arguments of the past behind us, come together and move forward together and start to look forward for a brighter future for Northern Ireland. That's what I think is now possible, and that's what I'd love to talk to you all about and take your questions. So thank you for having me. Over to you. Okay, who's going to kick it off? Right, yes.
Lovely, thank you. Good morning. I wanted to ask, you've talked an awful lot about the benefits of the agreement in regards to UK trade. We're obviously an all-Ireland business. Yeah. Are there any implications from that point of view that we need to consider?
No, and that's a really important point, and it's about balance. And we have to recognise that there's a balance to be struck, because it's really important to me and to many of you that in all ways, shape and form, that Northern Ireland is fully part of the United Kingdom. We are one country, and it can't feel different, it can't be different, and that's why we had some work to do to correct some of those things. But at the same time, we've got to recognise that for businesses like the one we're in, having access to that EU market, ensuring that there's no border north-south on the island of Ireland, is really important. It's really important for Northern Ireland's prosperity, for jobs, for opportunity, and that's the balance that we needed to strike, and I'm really pleased that we've protected that balance. because that's something that I heard loud and clear, that as much as we wanted to fix all the problems, we also couldn't lose the thing that people valued. And that's not been easy. It's been hard work, but we have protected that balance. And that's why I believe this is the right agreement for Northern Ireland. So businesses like yours will continue to trade freely, source freely on the island of Ireland, whilst having much easier access and flow between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and in all senses for identity, everyone feeling they're part of one country. That is what we've been able to achieve. But you're right to highlight that we need to think about that as well, and we have protected it for yours and every other business that wanted it. Right, who's next? Yes, Miss.
Thank you. Given the climate crisis and recent food shortages, is it time for the UK to reconsider its position in the single market to ensure a sustainable food supply in line with our European neighbours and reduce food air miles?
Right, so the question everyone heard about climate change and food sustainability. So, look, obviously climate change is one of the big things that we're trying to tackle. And just a few weeks ago, I actually changed how government works. And we created a brand new department for energy security and net zero, because I think it's that important. And I think we should have a dedicated government department that's run by a brilliant guy called Grant Shapps, who is going to focus on this, because those two things go hand in hand. If we want to continue reducing our emissions, we've got to find new forms of cleaner, renewable energy, but we also want them to be secure, because we've all seen what's happened over the past year as Russia has invaded Ukraine and the impact that's had on energy prices. We never want to be in that situation ever again. So finding forms of renewable energy here at home is really important. Improving our energy security is vital. So that's what that department's going to do, reduce our carbon emissions, improve our energy security. But you mentioned food. That's really important too. I come from, I represent an area in England in North Yorkshire. My neighbour is a dairy farmer. It's a very rural agricultural part of the world, much like Northern Ireland's economy, disproportionately agricultural compared to other parts of the UK, and that's really special. And our farmers want to do that. They want to increase the amount of food that we produce here at home to reduce those food air miles, as you said, and I'm completely supportive of that. And one of the benefits of leaving the EU is we can redesign all our agricultural schemes. I can see some nodding from our farming representatives in the audience, and that's what we've done, because we can make sure that our farming schemes really work for British farmers, that it supports the things that we want them to do, and importantly, improves our food security, and does that in an environmentally sustainable way. And that's the journey that we're on. There are opportunities for us to grow far more here at home, and I think with the investment we're putting in, that's what we're going to do. Great for our farmers, great for our food security, but as you said, also great for the climate, because we're reducing those food air miles at the same time. Right, who's next? Yes, sir.
The food topic. 1 in 4 children in Northern Ireland are in child poverty. What can the government do more to help the families living in poverty and going hungry?
I mean, like me, I'm sure there are many parents here, right? I have 2 young girls, they're 9 and 10, right? And it's actually, to think of children being in poverty is heartbreaking, right? I can't, it's hard to imagine. And you're right, far too many children are in poverty, and we should be doing everything we can to reduce that. Now, the best way for us to do that is to ensure that their parents are in work. So the absolute best way, if you look at the statistics and you look at what happened, you are something like 4 or 5 times less likely to be in poverty as a child if your parents are in work. It's that striking, it's that powerful. And we've done a really good job of that over the last several years. The number of children growing up in families where nobody works is down by almost 1 million. So there's something like 750,000 fewer children growing up in a situation like that, which is brilliant. And that's why there are hundreds of thousands of fewer children now in poverty today than there were several years ago, which is something that we can celebrate. But of course, we've got to do more. So we've got to make sure that we keep their parents in work, support them into work. That's why, as we talked about, investments here. That's real, right? It's not just about business. It's not about the economy. It's about providing people with jobs. And jobs mean that people don't grow up in poverty. Their kids don't grow up in poverty. And that's why getting this framework right is so important, because it's about creating those jobs, because ultimately that will benefit all those children. And there's lots of other things that we can do as well. As many of you know, we provide free school meals for children who desperately need it. we have other ways to support their parents as well, particularly with childcare costs. And something that people don't always know, that if you're on universal credit and you want to work, which is a good thing and we want you to, what we do now is we reimburse 85% of all the childcare costs. If you're someone who is moving off benefits and into work and you're worried about childcare costs, what happens is 85% of the cost of that childcare you can get reimbursed to support you into work, and that's going to be good for you, good for your family, and that's one of the things that we can do to help it. But you're absolutely right, we've got to keep going. We've absolutely got to keep going, and I can tell you that we will. Yes, sir, and then Miss.
Thank you. With the UK corporation tax rate set to increase to 25% from April this year, at which point it'll be double the rate in the Republic of Ireland, how can we ensure that Northern Ireland is still seen as an attractive location for foreign direct investment versus the Republic of Ireland?
Yeah, brilliant. Right, so question everyone here about corporation tax. I did say to the business guys earlier, I'm not Chancellor anymore, so I knew it was going to come anyway. No, look, it's a really important question, right? So, you know, why is it's going up? It's going up for all the reasons that I talked about a lot over the summer, and I talked about as Chancellor, that, you know, we're borrowing an enormous amount of money. That's not good. It's not good for the country. We've got to get our borrowing down. We've got to do that in a responsible way, and that's going to help us do it. And if you get that stuff wrong, you saw what happened last year. We've already got inflation higher than it is. We've already got interest rates higher than we'd like them. All of that just gets worse, and that's why we've got to get our borrowing back down. It might sound boring, but I tell you, it is deeply important, because if we care about those kids that we don't want to grow up in poverty, we're not doing them any favors if we're just putting a lot of stuff on the country's credit card and telling them to pick up the tab, because that is a surefire way for them not to have a happy and prosperous life. So that's why we've got to do it. But look, this is why you don't need to worry about it. At 25%, it will still be the lowest rate out of all the large economies that we compete with around the world, right? It also only applies to the biggest 10% of companies. So the vast majority of companies, now obviously not Coca-Cola, that's different, but the vast majority of small businesses in Northern Ireland won't see any change. They'll continue to pay the low rate that they're already paying. And the last thing to say is, you know what I want to see businesses doing is investing more. Right? So what I want to see is businesses making money. That's good. It's important that they do, but it's important that they invest that money. And that's how we create jobs. That's how we drive up productivity, just like Mars is doing, Coca-Cola is doing here, investing in new lines, creating new jobs. So what we want to do is cut taxes on the investment, and that's what we're doing. So if you're a small or medium-sized business, if you want to invest back in your company, if you want to invest in expanding your business, putting a new shop in, expanding your warehouse, whatever it is, we have an incredibly generous tax break for you, where you can write off all of that investment against your taxes, which is quite generous. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. It has a very technical name called the annual investment allowance. There's someone here from KPMG, or there was earlier, so they can explain it to everybody afterwards. But that's what we're going to do. And that's what we'd like to try and do more of over time when the circumstances allow. Now, the Chancellor's the one in charge of that now, but he's very keen to drive growth, to drive investment, and that's one way for us to think about doing it. I think the other thing to say is, because you talked about Northern Ireland, that is the prize that is on offer. Because if we get this right, if we get this framework implemented, if we get the executive back up and running here, Northern Ireland is in the unbelievably special position, unique position in the entire world, European continent, in having privileged access, not just to the UK home market, which is enormous, 5th biggest in the world, but also the European Union single market. Nobody else has that. No one. Only you guys, only here. And that is the prize. I can tell you, when I go around the world and talk to businesses, they know that. They're like, that's interesting. If you guys get this sorted, then we want to invest in Northern Ireland, because nowhere else does that exist. That's like the world's most exciting economic zone. And one of the things that is top of Secretary of State's in tray, once we get an executive up and running here, is to work with companies, not just in the UK, but around the world, to figure out how do we get them to come and invest in new things to take advantage of Northern Ireland's very special position. And they are queuing up to do so, particularly from the US, actually. They keep talking to us, saying, when are you going to get this thing sorted? Because we've got all these ideas. We've got investment that we want to bring, just like Miles is doing with Coca-Cola. That's what we need more of, and that is the prize, and that is the potential that we're going to realise. Because remember, the Republic of Ireland doesn't have that. Right? That is the special thing that only is in Northern Ireland, not just the access to the EU, but the access to the UK market. It's really important and very powerful for companies. Right, there was, yes, Miss, you were, yeah, perfect.
Good morning. One of the big challenges that Northern Ireland faces is a lot of young people and young talent are leaving Northern Ireland to seek education and work elsewhere, be it in the UK or further afield. What can businesses and government do to attract and retain young talent within the country?
Yeah, did everyone hear that? It's about people having to, or wanting to leave Northern Ireland. So I don't want that to happen, right? I say the same thing when I'm at home in North Yorkshire, right? People say, what does levelling up mean to you? What does levelling up mean to me? I tell you what it means. It's about opportunity. It's about making sure that everybody, every young person, wherever they are growing up in our country, can fulfill all their dreams, all their ambitions, so they don't have to leave. Now, if they want to, that's all good and well. Fine. But they shouldn't have to. That's what levelling up means to me. It's about spreading opportunity. And that's what we need to do. And it's about investment, of course it is, in communities, making sure that there are nice places to live, that we're investing in the infrastructure. But it's ultimately about skills and education and jobs, right? Those are the things that if we get right, I think we can do what you want to do. And it's about making sure that that young person feels, well, I can get the world-class skills that I need, the education that I need here at home, and then I'm going to get the job that I want to do, right? And that is a mix of things, right? To make sure our apprenticeships are amazing, that our universities are amazing, that our schools are amazing, and then that we've got an environment where our businesses are investing in creating those jobs in all sorts of industries. And that's the future for Northern Ireland. I mean, you guys know it, right? There are world-leading industries here. Right? Not just the business that we're standing in, but in life sciences, in pharmaceuticals, in financial services, in cyber, in advanced manufacturing. I could go on and on and on. These aren't just things that are good for the UK in Northern Ireland. These are things that are good globally. That's how high quality what we've got here is. So we just need to build on those strengths and make sure that if you're a young person growing up in Northern Ireland, you know that you've got a world-class education for you here at home and that you've got an amazing job waiting for you to go to. And if we can get that right, then we're going to fix it. But it would be nice if some of you also come over to Great Britain every so often, not least because half my office, some of them are here, are all from Northern Ireland. And then I have no one left working with me if you all stayed here. But we need to get it right. All right, who's next? Yes, sir at the back.
Good morning, Prime Minister.
Morning.
You're very welcome to Knockmore Hill. Prime Minister, my 14-year-old son is a member of the Northern Ireland Youth Assembly. It's a body which was established here to help young people influence the work of Stormont, especially in relation to those issues that most affect them. How can we better demonstrate to the young people in our society that politics is a force for good as opposed to something that just divides us?
Well, thank you for the welcome. What a great question, and I pay tribute to your son. I guess the first question to ask him is his assembly sitting right now?
Yes, Prime Minister, his assembly has continued to sit.
There we go. Well, you know what? That's the example right there. Right? That is the example. Right? And that's what we need to see. We need to see people getting around a table. We need to see people engaging with the detail of what we announced yesterday and seeing that it does provide a way to move forward. Because we've got to put the division and the arguments of the past behind us. We've got to. Right? If we want to build a better future, we want young people not to have to leave to fulfill all their dreams, if we want to make sure our kids grow up in great circumstances, not in poverty, then we need a functioning government here. And that's what you need, that's what you deserve, and that's what I believe we've created the conditions to now make possible. And that's the best example, though, that your son and everyone who's sitting in that assembly with him is doing. They're actually talking. They're actually talking, they're getting around a table. They're discussing things, they're making a difference. Now, unless people are actually there doing that, we can't, right? And you guys know better than me all the challenges that are building up as a result of there not being a government here, and that's not good enough, right? We all want to see that fixed, and that's why I really hope that everyone here will give the framework, the time, the consideration that it deserves and see a way forward. Because the events that I talked about right at the beginning remind us of the past. They remind us of that division. No one wants to go back to that. We want to move forward together. We want to build a better future. And I think with this framework, we've created the conditions for that to be possible. And I really hope, I can see you nodding. I know that that's what you all want to. And your son is setting an amazing example. And I hope everyone else follows him and his colleagues. All right. How are we doing? Yes. Miss.
Good morning. The question's a bit linked to the last one. So MLAs are elected to do a job, and they're paid to do a job, and they're not doing that job. And at a time when cost of living pressures are at an all-time high and taxpayers are paying those salaries, when is enough enough?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, so I was just going to say that we have actually done something on the salary thing, which, because you're right? And it's a totally reasonable point, right? And Chris has explained that in the past, but we have done something on the salary. We've cut the salaries, haven't we? Yeah, by 27%. So to your point, we have done some of that because we do want them to be sitting. We do want them to be doing their job. But look, I also recognise that there was a reason they weren't doing that, and there was validity to their concerns. Right? I'm going to be completely honest about that. The concerns that people had with the protocol were valid. Right? Now, look, how we deal with that is a separate question, but the fact that people had concerns about it, I think, is reasonable. Lots of people had concerns. That balance of the Good Friday Agreement had been unsettled, and it needed correcting. But we have now corrected it. The framework is a fantastic agreement that delivers on all the things people care about. So now I hope that they do see it and see that, and then can find a way to come back together. And that's what Chris wants to see. It's what I want to see. It's what all of you want to see. It's what you deserve. And what we've done, though, is empower that assembly even more with this new Stormont break that I talked about. I mean, even more incentive to get back in. So for all the people who said, well, we don't feel like we've got enough sovereignty in this situation, that there's a democratic deficit with this EU, we've corrected it. We've put more power in the hands of Stormont, in those very people. So, but they need to get back in. They need to get back in so they can use those powers. We've provided the means now, and I hope that with time and space, they will see that that's the right way forward. And I absolutely want to give them the time and space and work with them and answer their questions. But what you want to see is what I want to see. And I think we can now see a way that that can be possible again. Right, yes.
Good morning. Hi, we've already addressed this morning about poverty and children in Northern Ireland. For our more vulnerable, for those who can't go out to work, the energy scheme was essential. Was it successful? And is there any more help for the people of Northern Ireland?
Yes. Gosh, this has been the biggest challenge over the last year that everyone has been grappling with, protocol issues aside, is the cost of living. Right? You guys are like, for a year, every time you open up a bill, you see an email, you're like, oh my gosh, where did that come from, right? And it's just got worse and worse and worse, right? And that's why my first promise that I made this year when as Prime Minister, I made a speech, which hopefully some of you at least saw some of, but I made 5 promises to the public. The first one was to halve inflation, because that is the thing that is driving up everyone's bills, particularly with energy. And that's why, the question right at the beginning, we've got a brand new Department for Energy Security now, because we've got to have cheaper forms of energy here at home. That's the best long-term way to deal with the problem. But in the short term, we do have to help. And that's why this year we've provided an extraordinary amount of help, billions and billions of pounds. You know about the £600 that's gone to all households here. And we've got more support for the most vulnerable households. That is not ending. We are going to carry on supporting people over this coming financial year as well. So the most vulnerable are going to get hundreds and hundreds of pounds again through the welfare system. Pensioners are going to get extra help. Those who are disabled are going to get extra help. I announced lots of that as Chancellor, and the new Chancellor has continued that for another year. And on top of that, the government is still continuing to cap energy bills. That's what the energy price guarantee is. It means that whatever happens, the government is just going to step in and cap the maximum that anyone will pay. So that is a really big statement of support to everybody. And on top of that, we've got extra support for the most vulnerable, because it's right that we always have them in our mind as well. And then long term, with our new department, with brilliant grant chaps, we're going to have more offshore wind, more renewable energy, which is going to bring bills down and make us more secure at home. But don't worry, we are not going to let anyone get left behind between now and then. And the good news is that the plan is working. Inflation looks like, touch wood, The worst of it is behind us. We're on the downward track. And that's why when it comes, no one's asked about public sector pay, which I'm amazed about so far, and strikes. But that's why, you know, we've had to be disciplined. Because the worst thing I can do is not deliver on that pledge to halve inflation. Because it means you're still going to be dealing with bills going up in a year's time. And that's no good. We've got to just, it's going to be tough for a little bit, but we will get through it. Trust me, we will. If we stick to the plan is working, inflation is coming down. By the end of the year, it's going to look and feel so much better. But we just got to stick to the plan. And that's what we're going to do. And we're going to deliver for you and everyone else. Sorry?
Thank you very much for that commitment.
Thank you. Right, okay. I think we're almost running out of time. I'm getting waved at. We'll take a couple more. Yes, miss.
Good morning, Prime Minister. You've already touched on this slightly in terms of no one here wants to see a return to violence. Having grown up at the tail end of the Troubles myself, I certainly don't want it for our young people. Unfortunately, the NI protocol has been extremely divisive of communities here. How confident are you that this new deal will help heal those divisions?
Great question. Do you want to shall I take your question as well, sir? You have one, and then I'll do them both together before we wrap up.
There's a huge opportunity to improve the electric vehicle infrastructure. Currently in Northern Ireland, we have the lowest charge points per 100,000 people in the UK, and we have about 35% of the UK average, so how can the government help increase that going forward?
Right. Okay, I didn't know that, so thank you for letting me know. The question was about electric vehicle charge points. So we're not doing as well as we should here. Well, let me go and take that away and have a look at it. Right, well, yeah, actually, Chris reminded me, because I was going to say, a lot of what we're doing probably relies on there being a functioning government here, because we are doing quite a lot, actually, to support the rollout of electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And the stats that I saw recently actually show that we're doing really well, but that's probably on a UK-wide basis, and we need to do a better job here. Well, that's an important reminder to us about why we need a functioning government here, because we've got various subsidy schemes, we've provided money for local councils, so we've got lots going on, actually, and there's this new body called the UK Infrastructure Bank that I set up, which is a kind of government bank that partners with private companies, and they're rolling out charging infrastructure as well. We've got a fund, so there's lots going on. Obviously, it's not working here. I will take it away with Chris, but the main thing is we need a functioning government here to get on and solve things like that, actually. Because I think last year, God, 1 in 5 cars, I think, almost, electric. Right, I think that so we're really on an upward trajectory here, so we've got to make sure that the infrastructure is there for us. And let me finish on your question, actually, which is a brilliant question to end on. And, you know what, so I went to university in 1998. And so just Belfast Good Friday Agreement, that's when I became an adult. So I've grown up as an adult under that agreement for the past quarter of a century. My roommate at university, I hope he doesn't mind me saying, but my roommate at university was from Omagh. And I didn't, I came from Southampton. I didn't particularly know anyone very well from Northern Ireland. He actually, as it turned out, didn't really know any Indian people either. And we spent a lot of time getting to know each other and learning about each other's backgrounds. And it was, eye-opening to me how he had grown up. Right, what he had grown up having to deal with and live with. And so, look, I'm passionately committed to making sure that the Good Friday Agreement works, because it has brought peace and stability to Northern Ireland, and that is so precious. And we were reminded of how precious it was just this past week. And the protocol disrupted that balance. Because the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, if it's about anything, is about respecting that balance. It's about respecting the aspirations and identities of all communities in Northern Ireland. So we can move beyond division, put it behind us, and move forward together. And it did that very well. But the protocol disrupted it, which is why it needed resolving. That's why I've spent so much time, personal attention and care on this issue. And it's why I passionately believe that yesterday, the Windsor Framework delivers, and removing the source of that division restores balance. It means that things can flow freely around the UK internal market, as they should, because we are one country, and that should be easy. It means that we've protected Northern Ireland's place in the Union, so that if you're living in Northern Ireland, it looks, feels, and is the same as if you're anywhere else in the country, and you have the same benefits. And crucially, it restores sovereignty to the people and institutions of Northern Ireland, so you are in control of your destiny, because that is what is right. It is a major breakthrough. It is an enormously positive step forward, and now I hope, as I said, everyone can take time to study it, see that, and then we can move forward together, put the division behind us, get an executive back up and running, and build a far brighter future for everyone in Northern Ireland. We're going to do that together, and I think it's going to be incredibly positive. So thank you very much for having me. Thanks. Thanks very much.